being offended. Do not, 70 times 7 until it's complete. How long in Babylon? 70 years. 70 times 10, rather. 70 times 10. 70 times 7. 4 is not 490 in mind, in Christ's mind. He is speaking of 70. Go 10 times 7 is 70. Times 7 is what Christ mentioned in Matthew chapter 18. When he says 70 times 7, he is saying 10 times 7, which is 70 times 7. That's how often you forgive. Again, he's not speaking of 490 times in Matthew 18. He is not speaking of 490 times. He's saying, don't you cease, don't you quit. You forgive until the offender stops offending, until the offense stops being offensive, and until the offended, watch this, until the offended stops being offended. Do not stop. Don't quit until the offender stops offending, until the offense stops being offensive, until the offended stops being offended, until the cycle has been complete. So you got 7 times 10, 70 times 7. And how long do you stay in Babylon? 70 years. 7 times 10, 7 the number of completion, times 10 the number of completion, 7 the number of perfection and completion, times times 10 the number of completion. Law, testimony, when one cycle stops and another one starts. That's huge. Stay with me. Now, in Matthew 22, when they said to Jesus, well, which is the greatest commandment? Which is the greatest commandment? Jesus takes us back to Mount Sinai. He says, thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, and with all thy mind. He says that's the greatest. Why does he say that? Why? He's grouping them because why? Remember this, they're written vertically. Thou shalt have no other God before me. Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image. Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. Those are vertical. The first four is the number of universality. North, south, east, west, 4 seasons. Fire, earth, wind, water. 4 is significant. The number of universality. 4, it speaks of the vertical between man and God. Vertical. And then the 6, the next one, that's why he says, thou shalt love the Lord thy God. It speaks of the motive for the 4. Isn't that powerful? Jesus literally says the motive for the first 4 is loving God with all your heart, soul, and mind. Now, the next 6, the number of man. 6 water pots, by the way, the number of man. Notice they are actually horizontal. Honor thy father and thy mother. Thou shalt not kill. Thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not commit adultery. Thou shalt not bear false witness. Thou shalt not covet. He says, now the second is likened unto it. Love thy neighbor as thyself. Now notice what happens. He moved from horizontal from vertical to horizontal. He moves from vertical, love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, soul, and mind. That's the first 4 of the 10 commandments. To vertical. Because now, watch this. It stops being you doing it because you're mandated or doing it by commandment. Love your neighbor as yourself. That handles all, that takes care of the 6. That's horizontal. Isn't that powerful? He profoundly goes to the 10 commandments, and he does this. He links them this way. 4 vertical, 6 horizontal. Now, we see them side by side, but the truth be told, they are as a cross. That's why at the end, when Jesus discloses which one is the greatest, and he says the second is likened unto his, that's why he says on these, notice his choice of words, hang all the laws and the prophets. On these, on the 4 that are vertical, on the 6 that are horizontal, the shape of a cross. He uses the words brilliant, isn't he? Brilliant. Hang all the laws and the prophets. Because he is really saying, by the time this is done, these weren't supposed to just be 10 commandments. They are ultimately going to be 10 commitments. They start out being 10 commandments, but when these are written in the tables of your heart, when the laws are now a part of you, when water turns into wine and my words become spirit and life, and then I put my spirit in you, you shall walk according to my judgments, you shall do my laws. They will be natural. They will be as instinctive as breathing, and it will cease from being 10 commandments to being 10 commitments. Not a God commanding a people, but rather a bride that's committed to her bridegroom. Oh, hallelujah. Write that down. Not just the people that are commanded to obey a God, but rather a bride that's committed to her bridegroom. Remember what he says to the people in Jeremiah. He says, under every green tree and upon every high hill, you played the harlot in your spiritual debauchery and your harlotry, and you were stepping out on me. You were cheating. You were unfaithful. You were as an unfaithful bride. He says, but by the time I get done with you, by the time I put my laws in you and I put my spirit in you and I bring Yeshua HaMashiach, the successor to the lawgiver, and you move into a new dispensation, he moves you from just reciting the law, repeating the law, recalling the law, referring to the law, to now revealing the law and living the law out. Watch this. It will be as instinctive as breathing. You're not going to obey me because you're forced to obey me. This is not about forced intimacy or forced covenant, which brings us to our text in St. John chapter 4. That's why he says you're not going to worship in this mountain. Why? Because you had no idea, people of God, that when you do the undergrounds to Jacob's well,